SBC Media.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
The new year is upon us, but before we take a break to spend some holiday time with the family and ready for 2024, we are going to look back on 2023. The repeal of PASPA celebrated its 5th birthday, IGRA celebrated its 35th birthday, and the online gambling industry in the U.S. continues to grow and develop. Now it's time to take a look at the biggest headlines and trends that dominated North America over the past year on today's episode of iGaming Daily. I'm Jessica Welman, editor of SBC Americas and Canadian Gaming Business, joined by my senior journalist, Charlie Horner. Charlie, I hope big holiday plans for you. Just going to rest and relax?
Yeah, absolutely. Family time, football. What more do you want?
Same, but different football. Bowl game time, Tennessee with the family, and ready to just take a break for a minute because it's been a busy year for us. I think by the end of the year, we will have written close to 2,000 stories on SBC Americas, which is hard to wrap your brain around when you think about it. So we tasked ourselves with something kind of difficult, which is to take those 2,000 and kind of boil them down to our top 3 stories of the year. And I think you and I have both taken a tact where each bullet point kind of brings in several different stories, but kind of big trends for the year. So let's start. We're gonna do the backwards reveal. We're gonna start with 3, work our way to 1. So Charlie, let's start with what you thought was your 3rd biggest story of the year for the US.
Yeah. So I've gone with some. It's more negative news than positive news, but sort of issues around integrity. Obviously, we had earlier in the year 5 NFL players who were suspended for a significant period of time for betting on NFL games.
Or betting at the facility on something else for some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we spoke about this on iGaming Daily at the time and spoke about how ludicrous some of those rules are. But we also had some issues within the college sporting circle as well. So I think it was up to 50 student athletes in Iowa were investigated for underage betting, and I think up to a dozen of them could have pleaded guilty, and some of them were even facing criminal charges for underage betting and fraud because they had used somebody else's account to bet. Again, we can talk about whether the crime matches the punishment there, but worrying trends to say the least for 2023 there.
Well, and towards the end of the year, we also had Shane Pinto, which was the first NHL-related suspension for sports betting. And that one continues to have me intrigued, and I need to know more because they didn't really even quite tell us what he did wrong. All they said was that he didn't bet on hockey, but he clearly did something that was bad enough to be suspended like half the season. You know what? I'm going to put a positive spin on this, though, that out of those integrity concerns, what we also saw this year was that the NCAA, the NFL, both revisited their rules and kind of noted that maybe these are a bit outdated and strange and we should be more clear about them going forward. So they are looking into making those more clear and obvious. I think the rise of Prohibet, which is the U.S. Integrity Odds on Compliance partnership that allows states to be able to kind of access who these guys are before they bet and stop them from betting and that transaction even taking place. All of these are kind of the resulting solutions. So, you know, there is some good to kind of come out of what we saw this year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're like the angel on the one side of the shoulder to my devil.
This feels like a reversal of roles for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes to show that, you know, this has probably been happening for a while and it's only just been detected. I feel like there was a certain level of inevitability about this happening with the proliferation of sports betting across the country. and the associated advertising and just the sheer amount of exposure that these players have towards the industry. But like you say, I think it is a good thing that there are resolutions out of it and there are consequences that are ultimately positive.
Yeah, plenty of people will argue that by making it regulated and bringing it out into the light, you're actually just shining a light on something that was happening before. Hard to say for sure, but one way to look at it. Well, I was positive about yours, but my number 3 is a bit of a downer too, which is that after 5 years of breakneck speed of passing states and rolling out new things, 2023 was a year where stuff really started to slow down. We got Kentucky, we got North Carolina, we got online casino for Rhode Island, we got Vermont, but it really pales in comparison to even just 2022, where you're getting huge states like Massachusetts and Ohio. We had Ontario roll out in 2022. So things are starting to slow down and we're starting to kind of run out of new states to go into. And on top of that, you're really seeing operators starting to curb how much they're going to get involved in things. Just to name some of the books that shut down their doors over the last 12 months, you've got MaximBet, Unibet, FoxBet, PointsBet, PlayUp. And then while they haven't shut down their doors, Wynn pulled out of the majority of states that they're in and are looking to just kind of be in basically the 2 states where they have casinos. And when you look at other operators like Rivers and Rush Street, rather, they're saying, I'm not going to bother going into a state unless it seems like online casino is coming. So when we did have the rollout of a place like Massachusetts, where I remember thinking they had said in a meeting, they thought they were going to get like 36 applicants for sports betting or something. They had some huge pie in the sky number, and then they didn't even get as many applicants as they had licenses. In Kentucky, we have 27 licenses, and that's never going to be something that we hit the max on. But you're starting to see in these new states, 10, 12, that's about how many people are kind of willing to come in. And I think the gold rush days of everybody trying to get in everywhere have come and gone.
I think that's probably symptomatic of the fact that we have the established top 2 or 3 operators. It seems very difficult to break into that top 3. So, people are starting to pull the plug because it's really difficult, and operators, by and large, still aren't making much money. Making a profit is incredibly tough. And yeah, the legislative session in 2023 was quite depressing, actually. I remember we were sitting through all these hearings, and just it was body blow after body blow. I remember the Georgia debacle was particularly...
Oh, yeah, the push cart, the soapbox derby bill for children. That was a good one. Get ready. It's about to be that season again.
Hopefully it's a little bit more positive in 2024. And I think, let's look towards the online casino states, because if we can get a few more of those markets, then that could inject a little bit more life. Whether that's going to happen or not, I'm not too sure. Watch this space.
I will warn you, probably 365 days from now, I'm going to be saying market stagnation is the big story of 2024, because we're already kind of looking ahead and seeing Indiana, because they had kind of a casino corruption case related to their last gambling expansion bill, the state that has always been kind of seen to be the most promising to get it done, has already said that's off the table for 2024. New Hampshire is the state I'm hearing is the most likely to get online casino next year, and nothing against New Hampshire, not a big place, not a huge win. So, some of this is that we're just kind of running out of states to do this in. And some is that online casino, we've had this discussion on iGaming Daily probably 3 or 4 times. It's just a different sell, and it's a tougher sell. It's one thing to say we all bet $5 on sports with our friends. It's another to suggest that somebody should have access to a slot machine 24/7 on their phone.
Brazil, a global economic powerhouse, deeply passionate about sports, and now home to one of the hottest markets in gaming. And we're giving it the full SBC treatment. Join industry leaders, market experts, and all the major players in the country for 3 days of content, exhibition, and epic networking at the first ever SBC Summit Rio.
So something to look ahead for in 2024 if we do get any states, and if so, how big that market really is. All right, moving on. I think your number 2 actually has a bit to do with an important state expanding things. So what was your second biggest story of the year, Charlie?
Yeah, this one's going to rumble on into 2024 as well. This is the Florida court case. This is the Seminole tribe rolling out Hard Rock Bet, Wes Flagler and Associates saying, no, you can't do that, and it playing out at the federal level and the state level. And even though the Hard Rock Bet is now live once more, this is going to rumble on, and it's still ongoing, and we are still waiting on court filings, and it's been one of the more complicated stories of the year, something that's rolled on throughout the second half of the year, and to be honest, I'll be happy to see the back of that one when it finally is resolved.
Oh, you don't enjoy getting your kind of de facto U.S. legal degree with all of the paperwork that we've had to read over the year?
Yeah, it's been look, I've learned a lot from it actually. It's been a really interesting case, and we've done multiple episodes about what's happening in Florida. It's been very interesting to learn about the U.S. legal system. It's been really interesting to get to know a little bit more about the tribal relationships with the states and how these compacts are working, and in some cases not working. But yeah, it's just been a bit of a whirlwind, and yeah, let's just wait and see what happens at the state level, because I think that's going to really determine what happens at the federal level as well, and that's what Wes Flagler are waiting on as well.
Yours, it's a good shout and a good inclusion. The only reason I kind of didn't put it in mine is we're not done yet. And actually, this court case, in theory, is like 3 years old. There was the original case that the district court kind of ruled in favor of Wes Flagler. Then the Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the state and the Department of the Interior. Now we're at the highest level of the court, both at the state and federal level, and we won't really know quite what happens until next year. But to your point, it's an extremely interesting case, not just because Florida is a very big state. And for Hard Rock Bet to have exclusivity in there is just a huge win for them. But it also potentially does have bearing on other states and how states like Oklahoma and California might look at doing tribal sports betting in the future. You also kind of have to throw in the Maverick court challenge in Washington, which is similarly questioning whether this kind of exclusivity on sports betting is allowed or not, that there is impact on this beyond just Florida.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to set precedents and could shape the future of the industry from a tribal perspective. So I think it was important to highlight how important this case is, and roll on 2024 to see what happens.
Yeah, my number 2 will roll into 2024 as well, but I feel like 2023 was also the year that this really started to escalate, this war of daily fantasy sports sites, where, it does seem like FanDuel and DraftKings in particular are using a lot of lobbying muscle to go around to regulators, attorneys general, and even some legislators to challenge whether this pick'em prop style fantasy against the house being offered by sites like Sleeper and Underdog and Prize Picks meets the definition of fantasy sports. I think one of our most read stories of the year was our interview with Underdog CEO Jeremy Levine, who is, I will give him this, he certainly pulls no punches in the press. He says what's on his mind. But we've seen some states, Wyoming, they did get kind of a cease and desist from the regulators. We've seen states like Mississippi and Arizona in particular had signed, sealed, stamped, delivered, hey, you're allowed to do this. And now they're saying you're not allowed to do this anymore. Just this week, The Virginia Attorney General wrote an opinion that he thinks these games are not within the letter of the law for fantasy. However, there is a regulatory body in Virginia that has signed off on this and given these groups licenses and approved exactly what this one person's kind of legal opinion says isn't acceptable. So it's a tricky spot. You know, I think sometimes me in particular, I get kind of pegged as being pro fantasy versus the house. And to be clear, I really don't have a dog in this fight, but I think what you're seeing is PASPA in particular sets out just really vague language about what a fantasy sport is. And because so many states kind of mirrored that language or wrote similar language, now they're trying to kind of retrofit a sports betting definition into some laws that were written before sports betting was even legal in these states. And all I can say is I think there's a lack of clarity on a lot of these, and you're going to be judging and nitpicking commas and the single word of how statutes are written. And who knows, in 2024, this very well could. I mean, I think it's entirely possible it lands in court somewhere. It hasn't yet, but it does seem like nobody's slowing down. Nobody's stopping. You know, in Virginia, these sites said, well, we have a license. You said it's okay to be here, so we're going to keep being here because this AG opinion is just an opinion. Similarly, Florida was given cease and desist by a group that really doesn't control them. So those sites aren't backing down. Nobody seems to be putting the gas pedal off on the major sportsbook operator side that think this comes to a head in 2024.
Yeah, I can see this happening too. I think a similar situation happened in Michigan as well, where the regulator pulled all mention of these kind of pick'em style games from its own regulations, and as a result, I think Prize Picks has left the state altogether as well. My main takeaway from this is just how passionate these sites are about it. And yeah, I read your interview with Underdog, and Underdog's general counsel wrote an open letter to FanDuel and DraftKings, and that was similarly, you know, holding no punches. There was absolute fireworks in there. I think it's just been a really entertaining storyline to follow.
Also kind of petty about it.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I'm excited to see where it goes in 2024 because I think it's really important. And yeah, I agree with you. I think we'll probably end up in a courtroom as these things tend to do.
All right, we'll keep an eye out on that. And then, no surprise here, we both had the same top story of the year, which is, Charlie, you can do the honors.
Drum roll. It's the ESPN Bet launch. It's been dramatic. It's just been huge for the industry, and we're starting to see some of the figures of what they're doing since the launch in just a few short weeks, and it's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, I just wrote Michigan last night. That is a state where BetMGM has an incredibly strong position because they're one of the 3 commercial casinos. They're the top online casino operator. They're one of the few states that did in November fend off ESPN Bet's, initial surge. We've seen in a lot of states that they have leapfrogged both ESPN Bet and Caesars. But as you wrote in your story about Pennsylvania and what we've seen in states where we do know promo credit, this is coming at a price.
Oh, yeah. They spent nearly $15 million in Pennsylvania, which is just extraordinary. I wrote up Louisiana earlier today, and even though it doesn't individualize it per operator, sportsbooks in Louisiana spent about $1.3 million in promos ahead of the Super Bowl launch in September. In November, that has shot up to nearly $10 million. So you can really see the impact that ESPN is having, and it's really raising eyebrows, and it's something that we haven't been able to take our minds off since August when it was first announced by Penn, right?
Yeah, I mean, we Also, we're talking, we talked a lot about kind of Fanatics versus ESPN Bet as well. I don't fully write off Fanatics yet. You have to keep in mind this PointsBet acquisition is still kind of in process. So I think they're probably curbing marketing spend to some extent until they can get all of those sites switched over to Fanatics. Then you can start doing kind of broader, more national advertising and getting more bang for your buck. I haven't seen the same level of kind of acquisition efforts at Fanatics as we've seen at ESPN Bet so far. So that's my quick aside that, Fanatics, you are an important part of the year. You didn't make the top 3, but this is your consolation recognition. But yeah, I mean, remember when we were on here kind of laughing at the idea that ESPN Bet would get 20% of the market?
Absolutely. And they're already, they're
6
already
or 7 basically is what it's looking like. Again, at a price, a big asterisk at a price. But I think everybody has to be happy with how things are starting.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's, it's worth remembering that this was all at the expense of Barstool as well. And that was a whole other narrative, really. And how Penn just pulled the plug on it. Sold it back to Portnoy for what we believe is $1.
It is $1.
And he's going to ride off into the sunset a much wealthier man than he was before all of this. And it's just been a whirlwind of a story. I think it's been one of those ones that we will remember for not just 2023, but we'll remember it for a long time.
I mean, it's just such a 180. You go from Barstool, which is this brand that was, paraded before regulators and chastised numerous times this year. And they also just, the fact that they're willing to now spend on marketing acquisition, like that was the whole MO. Barstool was that we're not going to do that. So the fact that they are kind of all in, I need to watch a little more ESPN, and I'm sure I will over the holiday break when the nephews and I are, watching random bowl games and stuff. I'd like to see a little more what ESPN is doing on their side of things. We've seen some splash ads in-app for the regular ESPN app, fantasy, that kind of thing. But the integration maybe isn't quite there yet. So there's still a lot to do on that side of the partnership as well. And we'll see if that can help kind of build on what they've established with this kind of huge sign up and splash. In other words, all of our big stories from 2023 bleed over into 2024 because that's just kind of how this works, unfortunately, or fortunately. What else would we write about otherwise? Okay, on a lighter note, on a personal level, looking back, Charlie, is there any story in particular from this year that you just really loved reporting on, or an interview that you were particularly proud of? What kind of piece of content that you did stands out to you?
There was a story that I did earlier in the year. I think it was the start of the MLB season, and it was talking about...
I was hoping you would pick this one.
The rule changes. And for me, as someone from the UK, like I'm much more of a cricket man than I am baseball. So I wasn't, particularly well versed with the previous rules for MLB, but learning about these new rules, the timers and the pitch clocks and stuff, and how it would slow the game down, speed the game up, and how that would impact in-play betting, and how operators would sort of adapt to that was really interesting, and something that it came out really well, I thought. And I think people learned a lot from it because there's some really interesting people who were featured in that, including someone that you've spoken to this year, Rick Wolf at Spotlight.
Rick Wolf, if I have a pod of the year, it might... No offense to my co-host, but hearing Rick talk about fantasy is a great one to go back and listen to. I will say for me, so much of my life this year was the Massachusetts Gaming Commission that I have to pick something from there. And I think the one that stands out to me is not the sports betting stuff, because those are obvious and we all cover them, but there was this case of Raynham Park's retail sports betting license, and whether or not this man, Christopher Carney, was or wasn't a key stakeholder. as Raynham Park says, he was kind of just the dopey son of the owner who did some chores around the place sometime. But in the press, he is depicted as the president of the company. So it just kind of highlighted for me all of the things that frustrate me about regulations, which is that plenty of people in many states, and this isn't just Raynham Park, will take concepts like key stakeholders and do everything they can to make sure that people aren't getting vetted to the point that you will make it seem like you let, Tommy Boy pretend to run the company rather than admit that he's in charge. So the op-ed I wrote on that, just what does this kind of tell us about regulation and where there are flaws, I think was, for me at least, the most fun to write, because it's not often I get to type things like toxic sludge into what I am reporting on. All right. We will have tons of links in the description for this pod that you can go and check it out, the stories that we talked about, our favorite stories of the year. And be sure to keep checking out SBC Americas. We'll have some recap stuff during the Christmas week to keep an eye out for. And then we're going to hit the ground running in January with Nickel G's, the new legislative season. And of course, more from Florida. So keep tuning in both there and on iGaming Daily.
SBC Media.